Hello everyone, back to you in today's second video. So doing the GWV Sunday Roundup. For today's second video, we're going to get various things together like solar activity, what's happening with the oceans in terms of sea surface temperature anomalies. We'll have a look at Arctic sea ice, see how the melt season is progressing, and of course the usual weather for the week, for next week to 10 days as well. So quite a bit to cram in. It's going to be the last Sunday Roundup for some time actually, because next week we've got the GWV's autumn forecast that will be releasing, so no Sunday Roundup next week. And then after that we begin the winter updates, can you believe, from the beginning of September, when we'll cover a lot of the stuff that we include in the Sunday Roundup in those winter updates. So no point doing the GWV's Sunday Roundup roundups from the start of September. So this will probably be, or it will be, the last GWV's Sunday Roundup until at least December, possibly even until the start of next year. It just depends when I bring the Sunday Roundup back. So, I'll get on with that for you in a second. Before I get on with that, though, just very quickly say that earlier today we released the Autumn Analogues update, part 2 of those, looking at sort of front-loaded summers and see what effect that could have on the autumn. That's here on the homepage, that video, so just scroll down a little bit and you'll find it above the pollen count. Later on that will be placed on the autumn updates and forecast page, and there'll be a written post that goes with that as well. And also on the idea of autumn later on today, we'll have the final forecast from our good friend Terry Scully. He's dropped by with his autumn forecast. That will be released on his page later on today. And also on top of all of that, really busy day at the website today, I'll be doing the 5th update for the late summer bank holiday weekend, which includes Leeds Reading Festival as well. That will all be happening this evening. Right, better get on with the GWV Sunday Roundup. We're going to start off with solar activity. So this is the latest image opto disc on our side of disc today, and solar activity is actually pepping up a little bit just at the moment. So we've got this rather large cluster of sunspots just here on the solar disc, and another little area is appearing just over there as well. So we are having a little bit of a ramp up with the sunspots just at the moment. We can see on the GWV's summer season daily activity sort of tracker, which has just been updated by our friend James Ackrill, and big thanks to James for keeping this updated. We can see that we are getting another little spike in solar activity. So this is our current position in terms of sunspots just there, and you can see the way this orange line has really lifted up quite sharply actually over the past couple of days. You'll notice that we are getting these spikes in sunspot numbers periodically. So we have one there, we have one up there. Our last really big spike was actually back in March, when we had that push up in sunspots just there, and more going further back into last winter. So we are getting these spikes upwards. The trend is downwards to solar minimum. We'll reach solar minimum in around 18 months' time. But we can expect further sort of spikes in sunspots as we are trending down in this part of the cycle. Actually, this spike has been enough to begin to lift up the trend line, so you can see from the thick red and thick green, and up here thick pink lines, that we are lifting up the trend lines just at the moment. This won't last all that long, and we will start to go back into very weak levels of solar activity before too much longer, because we are heading into solar minimum. But it's, as I say, it's not a linear process. As we trek downwards, we do still continue to get these spikes in sunspot numbers coming along. True solar minimum will happen in around a year to 18 months' time. Again, the reason we look at solar activity is because there is a connection between weak levels of solar activity, so low levels of sunspots, and an increased risk of northern blocking, particularly for the Atlantic and Eurasian side of the pole in the winter. So low levels of solar activity, sort of solar minimum, if you like, increase. It doesn't guarantee, it's never a guarantee in the weather, but it increases the chance of getting more blocking over the pole in winter, and blocking is the route to getting the cold air out of the pole into the mid-latitude. So it is something that we look at to increase the chance of colder winters. Now, having a look at the oceans next. So this is the latest image of the oceans from NOAA. This is from the 17th of August. Let's deal with the Pacific first of all. And it appears that we are continuing to cool down, really, through the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean. We've got quite a deep area of blue now beginning to appear. That almost looks like a signature for La Nina, I have to say, and this is very surprising because it's only 2 or 3 months ago everybody was expecting to go into an El Nino, and in fact there was speculations sort of 2 or 3 months ago, but I had a super Nino such as we had in 2015-16, but you have to say that is beginning to start looking rather like the signature of El Nino. We'll have our next, of La Nina, I should say, a cold event. We'll have our next ENSO update on Saturday, next Saturday evening. And it'll be interesting to see whether there has been a shift towards La Nina with the model output. But it's got that sort of look about it, that does, across the equatorial Pacific. And you see all these cold sea surface temperature anomalies gathering around here off the coast of Chile. They're looking quite definitive as well, and this sort of does hint that we might be going into a bit of a cold event for the latter part of the year. It would be very surprising if we did go into a La Nina for the end of the year, but you have to say that is how it's looking a little bit like at the moment. Further north, the northern part of the Pacific Ocean is becoming quite warm again, so that will probably negate the chance of going into a cold event. Actually, we had lots of cold up here, cold sea surface temperature anomalies up here, then that would help going into a cold event, going into a La Nina. The fact that the northern Pacific Ocean is looking very warm again, that is going to fight against the chance of a La Nina. So that could in the end be what stops us getting a designated La Nina for the coming winter. In the Atlantic Ocean, so it looks like we're starting to warm up in the northern part of the Atlantic Ocean to the south of Greenland. Now, for a couple of months, this area here between Greenland and Scandinavia has been quite warm with the sea surface temperature anomalies, but now it looks as though the area to the south of Greenland, this area just here, is starting to warm up as well. We're still quite warm through the tropical part of the Atlantic Ocean just there, and so we're warming up there. We're still quite warm there. If this area starts to cool down, then actually we're going to have, or not going to be very far anyway, away from a bit of a tripod. Of course, a tripod is what we look for in the winter to have an increased chance of a negative NAO. So a tripod is one of the signatures that happens in the Atlantic Ocean when you get a colder or get an increased chance of colder winter conditions. Not that far now from going in that direction in the Atlantic Ocean. We'll certainly be keeping an eye on this. Of course, what's quite interesting about the warm sea surface temperature anomalies in the tropical Atlantic Ocean is that this increases the risk of having hurricanes through the course of this autumn, or certainly tropical storms. And things have been developing lately with the hurricane and tropical storm activity in the Atlantic Ocean. Of course, we've got the remains of Gert, which are going to be, which will be giving us a spell of wet and very humid weather over the coming couple of days. But down in the tropical part of the Atlantic Ocean, we've got a decaying storm just here. That was Harvey. That is dying a death a little bit now in the Caribbean. These yellow X's just here, they are more tropical developments. Not yet storms, certainly not hurricanes yet, but they need keeping an eye on because they might develop into something further down the line. And I would expect over the coming few weeks we will probably see more tropical developments beginning to take place in the Atlantic Ocean, with those pretty warm sea surface temperature anomalies that we have down in the tropical part of the Atlantic Ocean that we see just there. So we will be keeping an eye on the tropics, of course, in the coming few weeks. This does play a part in the winter updates as well, but I won't go into that today. Right, this is how things are looking in terms of Siberian snow cover, and we won't dwell on that because there isn't any Siberian snow cover at all. The whole of Russia now is completely snow-free, has been for quite a few weeks. Within the next month, we'll start to see a few little areas of white turning up. Then in October, what's going to happen is this whole area from Siberia over there to West Russia over here through October and November, that whole area will fill up with snow. It's one of the things that we look at in the winter updates. Further north, we see that the melt season, of course, it's well underway. It's been underway, the Arctic melt season, for several weeks now. Another big melt season coming up, most definitely. But will it be a death spiral? This is the latest in terms of Arctic sea ice coverage compared to the death spiral year of 2012. And 2012 is indicated by this green dash line just here. This is our year, this year, 2017, this blue line just here. It's a little bit hard to make out because it's very pale blue. But what's happened is what I was expecting, really. We have started to deviate now from 2012. For a long time, we was running very close to the death spiral year, almost on a par with it. But now we're actually breaking away from 2012. So at the moment, it doesn't look like we're going to have another death spiral. It doesn't look like we're going to go into the kind of melt season that we had in 2012. We're not all that far away from it, though, you have to say. And it is another very big Arctic melt season. Again, we've had this virtually every year since 2007. It accelerated in 2012. So it's going to be another big melt season in terms of the Arctic. But I don't think we're going to have a death spiral. We will wait and see. We'll know around the middle of September how bad it's been. Right, looking at the Arctic Oscillation next, and this is the observed and forecast chart for the Arctic Oscillation. Remember, this is just an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere in the North Pole, in the Arctic. It's not driving anything, it just tells you what the Arctic Oscillation is, what the weather pattern is doing, if you like. So the black line here tells us where we've been with the Arctic Oscillation. The red line is where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic Oscillation to go. We can go right way back into the spring with this. So back in the spring, we had a period of negativity of the Arctic Oscillation through April and May. Through most of the summer, this is the 1st of June just here, we was actually, or have been positive with the Arctic Oscillation, or on the positive side of neutral, let's say. The GFS ensembles look like they're increasingly trending towards the negative side of things as we're running up towards the early part of September. So it may be that as we end the summer and begin the autumn, we're going to start to see a little bit of northern blocking beginning to emerge, which is quite interesting because September isn't a time when you tend to get all that much northern blocking. So keep an eye on that. It could be we're in for a little bit of northern blocking as we move into the early part of September, which might give us something a little bit cooler and more unsettled for September, perhaps, or for early September, compared to what we tend to get. Now, interestingly, the North Atlantic Oscillation has really been deviating a lot from its counterpart, the Arctic Oscillation. So again, this is just an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere, this time in the North Atlantic rather than the Arctic. It's not driving anything, it just tells you what the atmospheric setup is doing. Again, same idea. We can go back into the spring with the NAO with black line, and then the red lines at the end where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the NAO to go. So with the Arctic Oscillation, the North Atlantic Oscillation also went negative through April and May. And then through the early part of the summer, we went positive with the NAO. So from June to July, we find the NAO lifting up. But since the second half of July and through the whole of August so far, we have been negative with the NAO, and quite substantially so. Interestingly, that's unusual because the Arctic Oscillation, its counterpart, has been in as we've already seen, generally neutral to slightly positive through this period. So it's unusual to get these two indexes deviating like this over such a sustained period. It's gone on for around a month now, maybe even more than a month, but we've had a negative NAO whilst we've had a neutral to slightly positive AO. The GFS ensembles appear to want to keep the negative NAO going. There are one or two ensemble members as we get towards the start of September that are lifting up into positive territory, but I think generally the average for the ensemble mean is probably to keep things in negative territory even into the start of September. So not quite sure what's going on there, but certainly this change with the NAO has coincided with a change in the summer pattern. The early part of the summer, particularly for England and Wales, was a very warm and hot at times and very dry pattern. A change occurred around the middle part of July with the NAO change, and that's led us into a much cooler and much more unsettled pattern that we've had even down in the south through August. Quite interesting what's gone on there. GFS ensembles the next couple of weeks. So the red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average. We've got a big lift up in temperatures coming up over the next couple of days just there. That's all associated with the humid air that's going to be dragged in from the low pressure that contains the remains of Hurricane Gert. So in the next 2 or 3 days, we're going to see temperatures lifting up. By Tuesday, we might well be up to around 82 Fahrenheit in central parts of London. After that, it's going to cool down into the second half of the week, going back to average with the temperatures. And it looks like we're just keeping temperatures around the 30-year average with the upper air temperatures anyway, as we go through to the end of August into the start of September. For precipitation, there's going to be rainfall coming up with the remains of ex-Hurricane Gert over the coming couple of days. After that, quite a dry spell through the rest of the working week, but over bank holiday weekend and into next week, looks like it's turning more unsettled. The rainfall spikes are coming back. Could be quite unsettled into August and even maybe start to September, which I'd say is a little bit unusual. The south surface temperatures are looking with the GFS ensembles. This is for Bristol today. So we're starting here on a relatively cool note, but as we know, we are going to see it lift up in temperatures on the surface as we go through the early part of this week. So for a couple of days around the Tuesday, Wednesday period, we are going up towards the mid-20s Celsius. That's 25 Celsius just there, after which we begin to cool down and go back under 20 degrees. And then there's no real sign that we're seeing the temperatures going back into very warm categories, although maybe there right at the end of August there might be a couple of days of slightly warmer conditions, but generally it looks like we go back under 20 degrees from around the middle and latter stages of the coming week onwards. For pressure, air pressure, so we find that at the moment we've got relatively high pressure. Actually, we're going to lower the pressure over the next few days with the remains of ex-Hurricane Gert. And then after that, relatively low with the pressure, I think, as we're going through to the end of August. Early September, this period just here, might start to see a bit of a recovery in pressure, but that is a very long way out. Temperature anomalies for the next week. This going from the 20th through to 28th of August, coming out a little bit warmer than average. Most parts of Europe going warm as well, although Scandinavia does look quite cool. But we're a little bit warmer than average in the week ahead. For precipitation anomalies, so southern parts of the country coming out a little bit drier than average. The week ahead, significantly wetter than average, though, in the north. So a real north-south split there for the precipitation anomaly from the 20th through to 28th of August. Finally, we'll just have a look at the GFS and ECM for the next couple of next week to 10 days, and we find that on Thursday we've got low pressure to the northwest of Scotland. That'll be bringing in sunshine and showers and probably relatively cool air as well into Friday and the bank holiday weekend. So it's trying to settle down a little bit, I think, from the start of the bank holiday weekend. This low pressure is beginning to push off towards Scandinavia, and it's leaving us in a slack sort of northwesterly flow. So the early part of the bank holiday weekend, maybe not too bad, but by the time you get through to bank holiday Monday, and this is quite a way out, of course, but it is bringing low pressure back in Sunday into Monday. That could bring some rain for bank holiday Monday, perhaps. And then we're off and running into quite an unsettled spell of weather to end August. This takes us to day 10, which is Wednesday the 30th of August, when it looks like we're in a proper westerly, showery type air mass. Although pressure's trying to rise a little bit, again down in the south, I don't think that comes to very much really. We can go out a little bit beyond day 10 to Friday the 1st of September, where it is still looking quite unsettled, particularly so up to the north. ECWF looks like this, so it's showery and cooler and fresher for the second half of this week into the bank holiday weekend. Trying to get a little bit of a ridge going there on Saturday, so probably a dry start to the bank holiday weekend. But by bank holiday Monday, it looks like it's unsettled for the north and west. However, for the south, actually, that's probably relatively dry. So the ECM is okay for the bank holiday weekend. The GFS looks more unsettled. This bank holiday weekend is causing all sorts of problems trying to work out what's going to happen. It looks like we still haven't really got this totally pinned down. Of course, it is around a week away still, so it's a little way out, but you would expect some agreement to be appearing now with these models for the bank holiday weekend. So far, we're not really seeing that agreement coming through. We go through to the end of August. This takes us to day 10, which is Wednesday the 30th of August, and it looks very unsettled up for the north, but for the south, actually still trying to hang on to a little bit of a ridge down there. So it looks like we're going to try and start bank holiday weekend on a settled note, on a relatively dry note. Probably going to turn more unsettled later on in the bank holiday weekend. As we run up to the end of August, I think the trend may be to turn things more unsettled again as we close out what has been a rather strange summer, you have to say. It has been quite an odd summer. It's been poor from start to finish for Scotland. Started off really good for England. Then deteriorated, we've already talked about this, it deteriorated mid-July. August has been quite a cool and unsettled month, and I think that's probably how we're going to end the month, to be honest, but we'll wait and see on that. Right, so that's the final GWV Sunday Roundup for quite a while. May bring it back in December, but next week we've got the autumn forecast exclusive to GWVs, and then after that, the first Sunday in September, we will begin again a new season of winter updates, which will carry on throughout the autumn till we get to winter forecast at the beginning of December. Right, that's all for now. Don't forget to check out the autumn analogues if you haven't yet done so. Later on, we'll have a look at bank holiday weekend, and also, of course, got Terry Scully's autumn forecast. So, a lot going on at website day. Keep checking back for more. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.